Sustainable Urban Network.
Hi, I'm Sonja Robinson. Tune in to Sun, Sustainable Urban Network, where we all shine together. The guests are hot, and the topics make the mic drop.
Sun back to new chapter. Justice now, not after. Clean energy matters. Fossil fuel not flatters. Rooftop solar in the mix is really good for the streets. Electricity needs a big rate relief. We gon' keep it pushing. Everything on the sun. Watch the show. We gonna have some fun. Walk the talk if you official. Proceed to run. 2020 inequity way to turn. Sustainable Urban Network. Justice is on earth. Sustainable Urban Network. Justice is on earth.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Sun Sustainable Urban Network. Happy Sun Saturday. You could be anywhere. We appreciate you tuning in and listening to our show where we work together collectively to scale up our neighborhoods. We have an excellent show today called Afrofuturism. This is our first kickoff series in our creative justice series. So really happy to have Dr. Lawana Richmond, which we will be discussing Afrofuturism in San Diego and even globally. And like I do on all our shows, we're going to go ahead and get started. And for those that may never joined our show, if this is your first time, you're wondering what is Sustainable Urban Network? Well, we definitely believe in addressing our racial, social, economic justice through the lens of environmental and climate justice, through sustainability. And so we believe that collectively we can provide information, have really dope guests to come on to share information and tips in order for us to increase the quality of our lives, and together that we can scale up our neighborhoods. Now, before we dive into the show, my guest, Dr. Lawana Richmond, and myself want to give a moment of silence for those that we have lost across the country in this unnecessary gun terror in our country. We also want to acknowledge those that we have lost personally as in the community. And I want to also mention that my son's grandmother recently passed. And so I want to rest in heaven to his grandmother, Bernie Brown, Grandma Brown. So she was Catholic, so definitely want to honor that. So we're going to give about 10 seconds moment of silence, please. Thank you. So those here in San Diego, we lost some really huge pillars in our community, and that being both Dr. Willie Morrow, who was a hair genius, a hair scientist genius that created the California curl that gave us African American, Black women and men a different texture and look to our hair. And his celebration of life was earlier this month at Bayview Baptist Church. We also lost Robert Tambuzzi, who transitioned as well. And he had an African memorial service as well as intermittent, and a huge pillar in the San Diego community. So we lost both of those. So definitely want to pay respect and homage to those as well. Now, I will go ahead and level set our conversation like I always do. And before I do, I'm going to help with a defining what Afrofuturism is as part of my reflection, give a couple quotes, do my sun enlightenments, give you a quick of what's going on, what's happening. Then we're going to dive in this conversation. So, what is Afrofuturism? It is an intersection of imagination, technology, the future, and liberation. And that was shared by author Tasha Womack. Now, the reflection for today's Sun Show is your imagination should be used not to escape reality, but to create it. And that's by Agnes Gomillion. I have another one because I just got all caught up in this Afrofuturism and preparing for this show. And so we got to give another reflection. You know, I normally only give one. So the other reflection I want to share is and this is by another art curator and Afrofuturistic, Ingrid LaFleur. And she says, I generally define Afrofuturism as a way of imagining possible futures through a Black cultural lens. Now, I love that. The Black culture lens, just like Sun, Sustainable Urban Network, we're addressing racial, social, economic justice through an environmental climate lens. So I would love bridging those two together. So, real briefly, what I wanted to share is our sun enlightenments. Our sun enlightenments are as such: one, be responsible for your resources. Two, take the state of our social and climate justice seriously. Three, don't wait for others, do your part. And four, when you do, give it your best effort and from a loving place. Now, who gets our Sunshine Award for this week? Oh my gosh, I don't know if you guys heard, but what I heard about this brave warrior who served our country, there was no doubt that she would get our Sunshine Award today. And who is shining is Miss Romay Davis, a 102-year-old World War II veteran, and she served on an all-female, all-Black battalion, which was the 688th Central Postal Directory in Europe, making sure that our soldiers receive their mail. She definitely gets our Sunshine Award this week. And then our fossil shade goes to any of those voter suppression practices that we have noticed throughout our country. Our democracy works better with more engagement, with more involvement, not with less. So any of those voter suppression practices definitely get the fossil shade. Now, what is going on? What's hot, what's not? Where this weather is hot for one. Have you guys been feeling the heat? Well, I know our country's been feeling it all over the country. So the heat is definitely on. There are extreme hot temperatures across the country. And it's really, really critical that our community have some safe practices that they can use to protect themselves from this hot weather. And especially with a lot of people not having central air or any type of air conditioning, and those that may have air conditioning are experiencing higher energy bills for running it. And that really impacts the lower income for Black and Brown communities. And oftentimes our communities have low tree coverage, or urban canopies is what we like to call it. So I am definitely encouraging you all to pack an umbrella. Definitely make sure you stay hydrated. Apply the sunscreen lotion. And for San Diego County, throughout our county, we have cooling sessions or cooling areas. And most of those cooling areas are at our libraries. So during the day, if you're able to spend some time at your local library, you'll be able to get out the heat and enjoy some cooler weather while it's been really, really hot. Another thing I want to mention, unfortunately, Colorado experienced a really bad tornado as well as storm that wreaked havoc there. And we've seen what's happening in St. Louis as well. So we know that this climate issue is a major issue. Oh my gosh, but did you guys hear this week as well that there was some success on a federal level? So on the federal level, on Wednesday, July 27th, a deal was actually reached between Manchin and Schumer on addressing our climate. And so that those details are definitely available for you guys to check out. But I also want just to let you know that they're allocating, I think, like around 370 billion with a B, $370 billion to energy security and climate change, as well as to help lower our carbon emissions by 40% in the year 2030, which is only in a few years. The bill also helps to establish a decrease in our energy costs and cleaner energy production. I appreciate this because you all know that I work really strongly for energy justice, and this has really been what I've been working on throughout the county of San Diego. So want to give big props to that. Now, on to my guest. So before I introduce my guest, we're going to have, real quick, I have to admit, I have to announce, excuse me, there's a couple of things. We have another big pillar in our community that's being awarded and celebrated, and that is former Board of Supervisor Leon Williams. He turned 100 years old, and there's a celebration at the county building, and they're honoring him with a Lifetime Achievement Award ceremony on July 30th at 3 p.m. So, as you guys are hearing this show, knowing that that celebration is also happening. And one other thing, Dr. Follow, one of my dear mentors, Dr. Follow and Wendy Sherrills are hosting their community health fair on Wednesday, August 3rd at the Jackie Robinson YMCA from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And you can get your sports physical, your vaccination if you want to, mammograms, and many others. Get your blood pressure checked. And that is on Wednesday, August 3rd at the Jackie Robinson um, YMCA. So definitely want to make sure that I let you guys know what's going on with that. Now, before I introduce my guests, we're going to hear our topic theme song to kind of level set our topic. And then I'm going to introduce Dr. Lawana Richmond. There's a breakdown now. All right. All right. Thank you, engineer. You did a fantastic job. So, who do I have with me today? And that's Dr. Lawana Richmond. She is the producer and founder of Afrofuturism Lounge and Dream Tank and AfroCon. She's also the San Diego coordinator for Black Speculative Arts Movement, a global network of Afrofuturistic. She is also here locally in the county of San Diego. She is the president of the Democratic Women's Club for San Diego County. Welcome, Dr. Lawana.
Thank you for having me, Sonja.
Yes, 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 yes. So, a lot of people, oh, I'm sorry, before we kind of dive into this topic, I want to give you an opportunity to share any other information you may know, what's happening in our community, or anything else you might want to share.
Oh, wow. I wasn't ready for that. So I will say July 30th is going to be a really busy day for San Diego. There are probably about 5 different events I'm trying to figure out how I can get to. There's a wellness fair event at ECC. There's, oh my God, I can't think of it. I'll send you a link later. But
Okay.
it's a day full of activity and events, and I just hope that people go out and show their support, because as someone who organizes events, I know how much work goes into it and how much it means for people to actually be there to enjoy everything you've prepared for them.
Yes, exactly. And I know that we had unfortunately lost a few of our major pillars in our community as well. Um, did you also want to share others that?
Yeah, like I just found out that that Dr. Paul Sims
Oh, wow.
passed away, and and he was like a leader in just public health and wellness. And, I keep, I've been stressing to, some of my mentees lately that your health is your wealth. If you
Yes.
don't take care of anything else, people talk about maintaining a car, maintain yourself. And Paul Sims was at the forefront of making sure that we understood what we needed to do to take care of ourselves, and advocating for us as well to make sure we had access to resources.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I had an honor to engage with him too. It's been some years though. I think with the pandemic too, it's been a
Yeah.
while to reconnect with everyone. So I just want to ask, let's just kind of start off our conversation with this is how would you explain to me and as well as our listeners what is Afrofuturism and what does it mean to you?
Okay, so the term Afrofuturism was coined in like 1993 by a Midwestern journalist named Mark Derry, and basically he edited a collection of essays in they were about cyber culture and just what was happening at that time. And he decided that his chapter would be called Black to the Future. And he focused on science fiction, art, literature, music. And one of the things he said is, for lack of a better term, Afrofuturism can be used to refer to art, literature, music, just creative concepts that center the Black experience in the future, and particularly in a technologically augmented reality. Since then, the term has been expanded by people of color, and Black people specifically, and we've looked at it as a tool also for liberation and expression. For me personally, I look at it as a way to connect the past, future, take what we have learned from the past, what we are experiencing in the present, and use those things to galvanize thought of the future and what kind of life we want to have. And then, I encourage people to exercise agency and think strategically. If this is where we want to be 100 years from now, what do we need to do today to start that journey? Because, change won't happen overnight. The other part, though, is Afrofuturism is a relatively new term. The concept is not so new. We had like the earliest piece of literature I found that's Afrofuturist was written by W.E.B. Du Bois in the early 1900s. And then I'm not sure how familiar you are with Dogon cosmology and their origin stories, where they talk about being visited by people from outer space, and explain that that's how they knew about this twin star system that people weren't able to see until a telescope was developed in the 1970s that was strong enough to prove that it was actually a twin star system, where the Dogon had been doing this ceremony marking out the orbit of this system for centuries.
Wow. So that's like astrology, so that's that science, astrology. You talked about technology and the literature.
Yeah.
So it seems to really pull together like STEAM,
Yeah, I
and
mean, it's really science, technology. I mean, because now, it's streamed. So it's science,
right.
technology, reading, engineering, art, and math.
Mm.
And the reality is they're all related. Some of your best mathematicians are also brilliant musicians.
Yes, there is a
Yeah,
correlation. I don't know. No.
yeah,
Yes.
I mean, just the way that you think. I mean, jazz musicians are incredibly good mathematically, usually. And then, but for Afrofuturism, it's kind of in the zeitgeist right now.
hmm I would
Um,
to say that. So the fact that you said that, I want to kind of zero in, and I would love for you to share of what just took place. I mean, so across the country, specifically here in San Diego, we just experienced Comic-Con, right? And so we have like thousands, tens of thousands of people that just flood to San Diego for Comic-Con, at least for like the last decade or so. And you have really intertwined and provided a platform for Afrofuturism Lounge during Comic Con, which I think is just that's brilliant in its own way. And you got a great press over that. And I would love for you just to share with us um, how you were able to integrate Afrofuturism with San Diego's Comic Con.
well, I mean, if you look at a Venn diagram,
Mm-hmm.
not all comic books are Afrofuturism, and not all Afrofuturism is comic books, but there is an intersection. The other part of that is being able to think of alternate universes and possibilities and superheroes is definitely in alignment with being a creative visionary. And, they're archetypes. The other part of that is, just having relationships. So originally it was going to be a private party, just for, some of the comic book creators who were exhibiting at Comic-Con. So they would have kind of like a place where they could connect with each other, because they're so seldom in the same city at the same time, that having a place where they can like link up is powerful. And we thought that would really be great. And then someone encouraged us to open it to the public. This is the first one in 2018, and 700 people showed up.
Wow.
So, I mean, I think what I found in talking to people who visit, Some of the people who come are actually artists who want to meet other artists and show them their portfolio and get tips and learn about the industry. Some of them are comic book enthusiasts who come because they know that like David Walker is an Eisner Award winning artist and that they may be able to have a different kind of conversation with him in that space than they could on the convention floor of Comic-Con.
So can you, for some of our listeners that may not be familiar with him, can you give us more of his background, kind of explain the work that he does?
Well, let me start, if I'm going to start like talking about comic book creators, I'm going to start local with
Yeah.
Keithan Jones.
What's his name?
Keithan Jones grew up in San Diego. He not only has he created his own comic book series of Power Nights that he actually started thinking about when he was a kid in grade school, but he also does commissions and work for other like major imprints and series. He actually organized Black Comics Day, which, if we want to be historically accurate, was the very first Black Comic-Con in San Diego. And then he helped me organize, along with Kamar Bradford, the Afrofuturism Lounge during San Diego Comic-Con. In addition to Keithan Jones, we also got assistance in terms of getting the word out and connecting with other creators from John Jennings, who's a professor at UC Riverside, an Eisner Award-winning graphic artist. He won his awards for adaptations of Kindred by Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, Black Kirby, Black Comics. He's like, yeah, and then like David Walker, who I mentioned, is done work for DC and Marvel, also does his own work. He's created historic graphic novels. The one that comes to mind most quickly is the one he did on the Black Panthers. He is a professor at Portland State where he teaches comic book artistry or comic artistry, because they actually have a comics arts major at Portland State University. And he's just a really, really nice guy. The first year, the very first panel that I did on the first event, I had Reuben Warren, who's a young man who's also a comedian out of Los Angeles, Shauna Mills, who has done animation with Pixar and a lot of other major studios and has her own Soda Monkey company. Trying to like picture the seats because I don't want to.
You were flowing and you doing, I mean, marvelous. So you fooling me. And one of the things I wanted to share is that my son has coined a term, and I really appreciate that. And I kind of wish he was able to stick around, but whatever, right. It'll be another time. So like a lot of the work that I do here, throughout San Diego County with environmental and climate justice, he says, Mom, and it's going to make sense in a minute for you. He goes, you're telling me that you and those that you're working with are trying to help save or lower people's electricity bill or prevent their bill from going up, and you got millions of people that have no idea that you're doing this work. And I said, yeah. So this was a couple years ago. SDG&E tried to increase the minimum bill, and they wanted the minimum bill, you're right, to be at least around $40. And we fought really hard against that. And at the time, I mean, she's our Secretary of State, but at the time, our Assembly member, Dr. Weber, she was like one of the only ones that wrote in a letter on our, I met with her and she sent a letter in support of that. And I got a few other electeds to do it as well, but not, I don't think any other Assembly member was willing to do it. But anyway, back to the point, we won, so the California Public Utilities Commission denied that minimum bill increase. And my son said, Mom, you guys are like the climate avengers. So that's what he's been calling me and those that I work with, is the climate avengers. And so, because I also work with, our allies as well. And so everybody loves that phrase, the climate avengers. So, I picture that, like the work I do within this comet Afro space as well. So we're going to have to get something going soon.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, when I ran for school board, my opponent, the incumbent board members actually created a comic book to use as their campaign piece.
Okay.
which
Okay.
I thought was hilarious since I'm the one that's in the comics. But
Right, right.
yeah, the other thing, if we're going to talk about Afrofuturism, I don't know how much time we have, but we
Oh,
cannot
got plenty of
talk
time.
about, okay, we cannot talk about Afrofuturism without talking about Octavia Butler. She's considered the mother of Afrofuturism.
Yes, I got one of her books. I love her.
Yeah, and so she was born in June of 1947 in Pasadena, California, of all
Wow.
places. And her writings are at the Huntington Library, I believe. And she died, like many of our great writers, in solitude. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that it's important. One of the things I like about the Afrofuturism Lounge is it gives me opportunity to like show love
Mhm.
to our artists while they're with us, because a lot
Right.
of times they're doing their work in solitude. I mean, and they're going out and they're going to different places and different spaces. And so, I don't have any illusions that I'm the only person showing them love, but I
Right.
want to make sure that when they're in San Diego, that they get to be in a space where they're highlighted as opposed to like just, folded in. And then the AfroCon is really, AfroCon is short for Afrofuturism Consciousness Convention.
Well, let's
Um,
go there. Let's go a little, let's go with that definition of AfroCon.
yeah, so I mean, with AfroCon, what I do, and I guess I do it a little bit with Afrofuturism Lounge, although I think I'm gonna tone it down a little because in the summer, people want to play, so I won't be so serious.
What do you
But
mean?
people just, when people are at Comic-Con, they're here to have a good time. They're not necessarily here to talk about a lot of social justice issues.
Well, you know what? One of the things I understand what you're saying. I believe I understand now. One of the things I really just give you props on how well you coordinated your Afrofuturism lounge this week, where it was over a few days, and even when we went to go see, when we was at one event, it was like walk around, pivot, bam, you at the next event. And I mean that coordination, I was just like, all I could do is give you love on that because I had no idea, right? I didn't know, how Gaslamp is, how far, but you just did a really, really good job in keeping things in spaces where we could just walk, and not have to drive far. And so, of course, that's climate conscious as well. I
Well,
got apple.
I encourage people to actually take the trolley,
Yeah,
because parking during San Diego Comic-Con is pretty, challenging. I mean,
bananas. Let's
you
just
can
say,
find, yeah, it's expensive and it's hard to find. So, yeah, definitely climate conscious. And, one of the panels was on sustainability through an Afrofuturist lens, because, I mean, as you know, I'm sure you
right,
talk about all the time about how, the people who are most impacted by climate change are doing the least to create it or cause it, and are typically minorities, which I hate that word.
oh, I
But
don't use it. I don't use it. I don't do it. I
but so
mean,
it's like it's
I'll
like
say,
BIPOC and marginalized communities, and
right,
typically people with less resources or access to power, or
right,
less adjacency to power, and so their neighborhoods are treated as dumping grounds.
right.
And when you look at countries where their infrastructure isn't even at a level where they could begin to start polluting, and they're going to be obliterated by the rising tides.
So to your point, literally, race is the number one indicator where toxins are located. It's the
Yeah,
number one indicator,
yeah.
and so understanding that,
Redlining,
huh?
redlining,
Say that again.
redlining.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. And there's a an environmental justice organization that literally is called Greenlining.
Okay. So I mean, really, the biggest thing, like with Afrofuturism Lounge, is to, there's to entertain people, and then while entertaining them, also present them with interesting information. So we had comic book creators, but then we also had the Black Scuba Diver and Snorkelers Association to talk about the work that they're doing to recover slave ships and artifacts in order to preserve history. And then we Sante Sefabuaki talking about his polo league in Ghana, and how and just getting Black people in the water and slaying that whole myth that we can't swim or don't swim or
Right.
shouldn't swim or whatever it is. I mean, those of us who don't swim, I think it's because of genetic trauma experienced during the Middle Passage.
That's deep.
Yeah, because if you think about it, I mean, during the Middle Passage, there were people who were like, I can't stand this. I went off of the ship and they jumped in the water, and people watched them die and get eaten by sharks. And so that's embedded in our genetics, because it's been proven in recent research that like veterans of war that come back with PTSD, it impacts not only their genetic material, but they pass that on through their genes to their progeny. And what happens is that is where the predisposition for certain stress-induced diseases like heart conditions, high blood pressure, hypertension, diabetes, strokes, all of those things, you can look at where the genetic markers were flipped by trauma.
Wow, yeah, that is really deep, and how they all just pull together. I agree with you, and I also appreciate you pointing out that there's plenty of us in our Black community that do swim as well, right? So, in some cases, like you said, it might be some of that predisposition from that passage, and then also, but just know too that that doesn't mean all of us don't swim, right? So,
I swim like a fish. I
right,
mean, yeah, you can't keep me out the water, but I also think it was important though to have them there. And in the same way, AfroCon, on the surface, there's a DJ playing, there's food, there's
fun.
It's just fun, cosplay, all this stuff going on. And then, like, if I always say, wherever you go, what you look for is what you will find. So if you're looking for something else, beneath the surface, there are these workshops happening where, critical thought is taking place and gatherings of some of our greatest thought leaders within the Afrofuturist field. And then, with AfroCon, we're also adding a hair and fashion of the future show, as well as a film festival.
So this is all something that you guys took place this past week, or was it like Thursday, Friday, Saturday?
So it's just Thursday and Friday, and that was Afrofuturism Lounge. And what we did, we had workshops, panels, we had singers, rappers, we had some, poets, and then we also, there was a bar, there was food, and we had the vendors and exhibitors, and people were selling books and talking about their different organizations. And we had some workshops. We did a silent bowl, cosplay bowl party at the Tavern Bowl, which is right down the street. And then we did
with headphones.
Yes. And then we did the what do you call it? The closing after party at Chef's SD.
And then I know I participated in some of those earlier events, like even with, I really like that feature film on Afropunk.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we showed, well, it's Afropunk. We had James Spooner was actually our keynote speaker on Thursday. So he made the film Afropunk, and then that film sparked the creation of the Afropunk Festival, and he was one of the early organizers. And he actually talks about why he's not involved with Afropunk anymore.
So can you give us his name again?
James Spooner. If you look him up on Instagram or anywhere else, he's Spooner's No Fun.
Okay, Spooner's No Fun.
Yeah, and all of his work is really about his experience as a kid that would be considered an outlier. Because part of the reason he made Afropunk, made the Afropunk film, is that people had this idea of like what being Black meant. And then people had this idea that the punk rock space was just a white space. And both of those ideas were false. And so he created his documentary to counter that false narrative.
So yeah, I really appreciate that, because I know that I have family members, in different generation gaps that definitely have this like punk appetite, that they listen to punk genre as well, Pink Floyd and, other,
I grew up listening to Pink Floyd. I mean, come on. I grew up in San Diego.
Right, right, right. So I mean, I can't think of all of them, but I just know, I have some relatives
Oh,
that,
Dawkins, Metallica,
yeah, on both sides, right? Because I literally,
Slash,
one of my cousins, he's a lot younger than me. He listens to me, he grew up with
Bad Brains.
everything you're saying, and then also he loves Pac. You know what I'm saying too? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we're not just monolithic, if you will. So no, I was able to like really appreciate that, and also, you know, even I remember in middle school out here in Cali, I was exposed to some of that, rock and punk too. I didn't like all of it, but some of my friends.
You know what? I don't like all of anything.
Right.
I mean, I haven't like met a person, place, or thing where I'm just like everything is perfect. I like it all. But,
You're right.
I mean, come on. I think part of what a lot of people run through life and disenfranchised or dissatisfied or unhappy is that they have this like expectation that anything is going to be perfect. There are perfect moments. And when you experience one of those, like cherish it and savor it. But like,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, everybody's human. That's human. And, whoever's not, what the expectations are.
So I use that same theory literally verbatim, even when it comes to the other space I work in a lot, what is, well, not the other space, because I work the environmental climate justice into public policy. But when it comes to public policy, that's literally what I said. Is like, you don't agree with your spouse for everything from A to Z. Why would you think you can agree with a candidate from everything from A to Z, right? So it's just, mainly like maybe your core values, or, what is, when you look at how you weight your priorities and what's important to you. So I definitely agree with you. So share with me, why do you think Afrofuturism is important for our Black culture?
So honestly, I think Afrofuturism is one of the things that's going to save the world.
Mm.
And I say that because, especially, all right, so let's start with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many of us who are living in the past or paralyzed by the present and
Mm.
unable to move forward, or limited by belief systems that are rooted in, um, you know, history a false history or a false narrative that was taught to us. And when you go to people and you say everything that you believe is really not true, that doesn't work. So Afrofuturism, coming at people with art and culture and entertainment, um, they're a little bit less clingy to their self-limiting beliefs and
Mm.
able to like expand their thinking. The reality is, as long as we don't understand our own agency and don't shift our focus to the things that we actually have control of and can do for ourselves, we will not be accomplishing nearly as much as we could be.
Wow. So you gave me a really great framework, right? Like, you gave me this great generalization.
Mhm.
What I'm going to ask, if you can kind of give me just a little flavor on a specific, when you meant, or how would you even like bring out from the truth, because you mentioned false narrative, right? And then you
Mhm.
also talked about limited belief systems. So can you either give me an example of what you meant by limited belief systems, and then how Afrofuturism would be will mitigate that gap to enhance our future?
Okay, so let's think about career choices and career options, right? So a lot of times they say if you can't see it, you can't be it, right? And Afrofuturism creates a space where you can see people being and doing any and everything. I mean, think about how many people change their perception of leadership and wealth and technology when they watch the first Black Panther film.
What do you mean? Give me more specific on that.
Well, I mean, just the level of technology in Wakanda, the level of sophistication of the nation, even the integration of African fabrics and patterns and
Mhm.
customs and rituals. And they were presented in a way that made it more contemporary and
Mhm.
more closely adjacent to our current lives. And at the same time, the mystery of Wakanda kind of created a space for us to imagine that, perhaps there are things out there that we haven't seen or haven't experienced that are greater than what we are seeing and experiencing now. Seeing, for example, and this is not an Afrofuturism thing, this is a real thing. Before Barack Obama got elected to the presidency, there were many people who didn't believe there would ever be a Black president.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. My grandmother, God rest her soul, she passed away, I mean, a while ago, over 20 years ago, but she used to always tell us that there will be a Black president. She believed that it would. She didn't get the chance to see Barack Obama elected, but I know as a family members, we marveled in her faith that she shared with us that it could happen. Now,
Her vision.
but I appreciate that you brought up Black Panther, Wakanda, because that is, from my understanding, but you're the expert with this. From how I see Afrofuturism is that Black Panther is an example of
Mhm.
the Afrocon and Afrofuturism.
Yeah.
And then when you brought that example up, what I thought about when you mentioned before, with coming from a place with limited belief systems and even false narratives, and then leveraging that culture and art to imagine what it could be. That movie in itself was a perfect example, because you had that Eric Killmonger, right, and Black Panther, and how Eric's viewpoint was not just cloudy, and I'm not even sure what great description to use, but was that false narrative of being from the American culture, right? And not exposed to his native. Um,
Well, I mean, I would say Eric Killmonger was a little bit more complex than that, in the sense that
Very complex.
he was aware. He was well versed. He probably knew the rites, rituals of his indigenous culture better than some people who lived there, because he consciously sought the knowledge and was out there recovering artifacts. I think that we always have origin stories for our so-called villains.
Oh,
And
girl, he was my one of my heroes. I mean,
right.
we could probably have a
Yeah.
whole show. I think we probably should, and just pulling that back.
Yeah.
I related to him more than some of the other characters, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
marveled and respected all of them, but no, he was my favorite. I don't want to. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, no, because
For,
I feel like he was somebody in pain and conflicted.
oh my gosh, I think that's why I was able to relate, right? So there is
Yeah.
a
Yeah, but there were all these different points of views, and I think everybody who watches the film will find a character that they can relate to and a point of view. I mean, there's some people who their favorite character was Angela Bassett.
yeah, Auntie.
Yeah. Truth be told, my favorite character was Shuri.
Okay, the sister.
Uh-huh. And then
I liked her too.
yeah, and then but then I loved the thing that I loved about the film more than anything was the strong female characters
Oh my gosh,
who were also
the warrior.
able to be feminine.
I love that too. It was
Yeah.
amazing how they really elevated the power of Black women, right? And the contribution in a respectful way. I mean, that in itself was just, like I said, it was brilliant. It was amazing. And isn't Black Panther 2 coming out soon? Like the trailers are
November.
already.
The trailer's out. It's coming out in November. I'm actually looking at there once again there will be private screenings where people rent out movie theaters and dress up and do the whole thing. And like, for some people, the release of Black Panther film was the very first time they cosplayed.
The first time, what?
That they cosplayed.
Say that. Break that down.
So cosplay is a really it's a part of the whole comic con Afrofuturism comic book universe fandom, in where a person dresses up as a character.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, you
Right,
know,
because I think we went
sure.
dressed too. You're right. I had on my dashiki.
Yeah, but I mean, there were people who went dressed as the Black Panther or dressed as Shuri or dressed as, you know, some other character. I saw, when I saw the movie, I saw it at 3 different theaters.
Okay.
One was like a private screening that was like 99% Black people. One of them was at the ArcLight in La Jolla.
Okay.
Yeah, and then one of them I just went like to the neighborhood movie theater in Chula Vista, you know. The thing is, everywhere everybody was excited, and even in La Jolla, you had kids dressed up.
Mm.
You know, and these were like not Black kids. These were like kids, you know, of every background who were there because they were excited and they were dressed up as the Black Panther.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the movie was brilliant. It was, I mean, of this extremely high quality. And I love how it was received, embraced, and loved, right? But it was like hard not to appreciate it, because of the brilliancy and the excellence that it
I
that it
mean,
produced.
there was a lot of conversations about the film, and also about, also, you know, okay, that's great. This is a you know, and no shade to the Marvel universe or to Stan Lee or to anybody, but this is another Black character that was created by a non-Black person.
It was
And that's fine. I mean, you know, because you know, when I write, I don't just
fascinating.
write about Black people. And when I plan things, I don't just plan things for Black people. The thing though is, can we also elevate and illuminate the people who are creating characters from their authentic experience?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we also have to give Ryan Coogler credit for what he did in terms of making the film everything that it could be. I mean, there was a lot of care, you know, the costuming, the casting, the score, the timing, you know, and just in terms of the characters and how they presented, it was it was done at a level of excellence and authenticity that, you know, many people cried, not because they were sad about the movie, but it was just tears of joy that there was something that was so
You're right.
relatable and connected to our experience as Black people on this planet.
Yes, you're getting me goosebumps right now, just remembering. I
Oh, you know,
remember,
get ready.
huh?
Get ready, because the
I
second one's
know.
coming out and they've got Ryan Coogler again.
And I
So
can't I know I probably watched it a couple times. My son, I don't remember how many times he saw it. I mean, he's a big superhero fan in general, and of course, you know, Black Panther. But what I found interesting each time he came home from watching it, it was a different experience, right? It was like you literally, you just peeled this onion, you know, where the first time it was just all, joy and, exuberant. And the next time was more like deep thought and, where you seeing the characters from a different, view. And
yeah.
yeah, yes, it was definitely, like I said, brilliant in all its right and in all of its glory that it deserves. And I appreciate that you brought that up as an example of what Afrofuturism really is. Let me ask you
But it's
this.
also, but Afrofuturism is also looking at a decrepit, a neighborhood that is struggling, and being able to see what that neighborhood could be, and getting other people in the community to buy into what it could be, and working together to co-create an experience for future generations.
I love that. I do. Because, like you said, imagine that, even sometimes imagine the imaginable. And as you mentioned, how can you help coordinate and organize to get the resources you need to produce? That's something that I, in a space that I don't necessarily title it that way, right? Don't necessarily frame it. So I'm definitely appreciating this lens that
So I
you're
wanted to,
providing. But I
I
want
want,
to ask you something, if I
oh,
can. What I want to hear, especially based on what you just said, is
uh,
your view. What is your vision for Afrofuturism? And also, if you could share some milestones that, that you've seen over whatever period of time that supports your vision with
Okay,
Futurism?
so I see Afrofuturism being a part of what helps us to decolonize the education system. I mean, I
Mm,
think inclusive futurism, indigenous futurism, I think being able to co-create and isolate and create futures that show all of us in our best light, working and playing together, being able to play well with others is important. Um, I see that as, an instrument of freedom.
So
Um,
can you explain to me okay, when you said like decolonize the educational systems, because I didn't include this in your bio and introduction. I hope you're okay, but you do work in academia, right? And I know that
yeah,
Afrofuturism definitely has a presence at UCLA as well as UCSD here, University of California, San Diego, as well as University of California, Los Angeles. So, and I appreciate that some of these academia environments see the intersectionality with Afrofuturism. I hope you are okay with me mentioning that you also.
yeah, I mean, that's fine. I thought you were
Okay.
going to talk about me running for school board. But so, because that's where I really started talking about decolonizing the education system. So, in terms of a presence, Afrofuturism has a presence at San Diego State, at USD, UC Riverside, at USC, at, it goes on throughout the state and east and what,
Mhm.
it's a global phenomenon, and it's being studied by academics.
Mm.
What I'd like to see is it becoming more and more mainstream, and also looking at all forms of futurism. If the way things are is not the way we want them to be, then every journey begins with one, acknowledging where you are, and two, having a clear understanding of where you're trying to go, and then three, plotting a course to get there, right? And so I think that there's a place where all of that can happen. That's why I created the Afrofuturism Dream Tank. But I also want to tell you that every social justice movement is actually an act of speculative fiction, because social justice movements revolve around being aware of an existing current state and imagining an altered state and engaging in action to get to that imagined state. That imagined state is the part that's speculative fiction.
Okay.
Speculative fiction is really just fiction that asks what if, like, what if the world was like this instead of like that?
Okay. No, definitely I appreciate you breaking that down. That is great. So, what did you exactly mean by or did you answer it, and maybe I just didn't get the answer I wanted to land on about decolonizing the educational systems?
Okay, so I'll get back to that. So a lot of who we are, how we are, what we believe, what we can't do, the way that we interact with people can be traced to what we are taught in school. And the current K through 12 education system, and I would even posit that much of post-secondary education is rooted in white supremacy. The textbooks, the history that we learn was written through a lens. We've got this whole mythology, this mythos. There are people who really believe that, like, who chopped down a cherry tree and who can't tell a lie, and all these like weird things we're taught when we're kids that we find out later aren't really true. Um, even like, the Emancipation Proclamation, the way that history is taught, it's framed in a way that's convenient and makes everybody seem nice.
Hmm.
And the reality is, when we talk about, social justice issues and say, look, this is not okay, people who are not experiencing the injustice and who grew up in a system that taught them that everything is wonderful. Civil rights was solved when Martin Luther King marched on Washington. So what are these people complaining about? I don't have any problems. I have great relationships. I've been in meetings where white people have said, what is the problem? I have a great relationship with the police. And I think they're missing the fact that it's not even, it's deeper than the relationship. It's about the experience. And the reality is, how many of them break out in a sweat and start fearing for their life when there's a police car behind them?
Mm-hmm. No,
I mean, so I think teaching history in a way that's more accurate and telling the story in a way that is less sympathetic to the victor would actually help people have a better sense of how the world is and how it could be.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. And that makes sense. So we're like towards the end of our programming, but what I want is an opportunity for you to share anything that you want us to know about Afrofuturism in general, Afrofuturism Lounge, the Afrofuturism Lounge and AfroCon that just took place at Comic-Con, anything that you may have prepared or planning for next year to get people ready and excited about it.
Right.
Definitely want to give you this platform.
Okay, so I'll start by saying next up is the Afrofuturism Consciousness Convention, better known as AfroCon, which will be taking place Labor Day weekend, September 3rd through 4th. We'll be including fashion, hair, art, music, exhibitors, vendors, food, photos, cosplay competition. We typically give away like $250 to the best cosplay player, and then also a film festival. So it should be a lot of fun. And
where would it be?
So I want to wait to disclose the location after the contract is finalized.
But it's going to be here in San Diego or in San Diego County?
Yeah, it'll be in San Diego, ideally Southeast San Diego, so that it's accessible and a place that has plenty of parking and very family friendly, space for the kids. And then the other part is the Afrofuturism Dream Tank is a framework for all these big ideas that I talk about. It's the framework where the execution takes place, where
That's
people
good.
go like into a think tank, and so I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Afrofuturism. You probably know I can talk about it all day and all night. I wake up thinking about it. I go to sleep thinking about it.
That's your passion. I love that. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that it can be fun. There's so many aspects of it. I tend to be a little bit more serious, but there are a lot of people who are into it that just have fun. I mean, there are people who cosplay and, enjoy running around in Spider-Man or Spider-Gwen suits and shooting in the street. And, and that includes gaming. So let's, not forget all the career opportunities in EA Sports.
Okay, well, let's mention it. We only have like maybe a minute left.
Okay, so people can so just the making of a game, you've got the designer, you've got the storyteller, you've got the music, you've got the graphic design, you've got the packaging design, you've got the actual manufacturing, production, and distribution. And then they have these gaming tournaments where people are winning these huge purses just for being good at video games. So like people who have problems with their kids playing video games, just figure out how to make it where it works for them. Figure out how they can tie their passion into their life. A lot of times we try to push people into practical directions and they're miserable.
You're right. And that's not their talent or their strongest skill sets and passion. So even though it might work for a paycheck, as you mentioned, it may not just be a fulfill role or fulfill profession, if you will. So
yeah. So I mean, thank you again for having me. And then people can go to afrocon.net.
Afrocon.net.
Yes, Afro, like, all this.
Yes,
con.net.
Love it. Thank you, Dr. Lawana Richmond with Afrofuturism Lounge, AfroCon. It is a pleasure of having you here. She was on, I think, KUSI, KBBS, covered her many other media on the work that she's doing. And next week, we're going to have our Hip Hop 5K folks. We're also going to have another creative justice with the Art District. Thank you guys for joining us on Sustainable Urban Network. Thank you so much. See you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to Sun Sustainable Urban Network. Check us out on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Pacific Time. Let's scale up our neighborhoods, y'all.